Thanks again for coming. I am Eric Schumacher-Rasmussen. I'm the editor and VP of Streaming Media, and this is the third of our Fireside Chats today. I have Rebecca Glashow and Shelley Zimmerman from Awesomeness. We're going to talk about reaching Generation Z. How many in the audience actually have teenagers right now? Only a couple? Only a few, all right. Well, I've got a 13-year-old at home.
Oh, there you go.
I've
you
got
can do this whole thing without us.
You're living it.
That's it, exactly. I've got a 10-year-old, and they couldn't be more different in how they watch television.
Yeah.
And they're both very different from my other son, who's 30 years old. So it's, I've got the whole gamut here, right? But we're going to talk a little bit about how Generation Z in particular watches video, watches content, what they are looking for, and how to best reach them. And that's really Awesomeness' specialty, right? So let's just start off with that. Give us a little background on Awesomeness and your definition of Generation Z and what they're all about.
Great. I'll start. Awesomeness was founded about 7 years ago by Brian Robbins. And what he saw as he looked at his own teenage children was exactly what you're talking about, that YouTube was so important to them, the importance of being able on demand to get what you wanted. And what he also recognized was they had their own stars, their own social media influencers who meant a lot to them. So inspired by that, he started Awesomeness, which is a digital-first studio where we make a lot of content, 15 shows a week for YouTube and other platforms where the audience is, Instagram, Snapchat. In addition to that, we have a full television and film studio that's serving longer form content, primarily through the streamers, through Netflix and Hulu, to that same audience. And we're creating an entire eco-verse of content that we want to be wherever that audience is. And so we want, if we know they're on Netflix, we want to be on Netflix. So we're kind of building a brand across all of those different platforms.
Yeah, so two-part question. I'll take the second part, which is, who is this audience? It's really, technically they're born 1995 up until now, but it's really the first generation that was born into the internet. They never experienced life without the internet. So fundamentally, their access to information, data, content has been, transformed by the internet, ultimately smartphones, and the streamers. And I think what was really brilliant at the founders recognized that with an audience that's not growing up necessarily on cable television, certainly not with linear TV, how do you build a brand that means something to them for this generation where we can entertain them, understand them, and have that connection, which is never existed before, really. Linear TV is a one-way experience. You don't have that engagement, interactivity. This audience feels, not only do they know who the talent that they care about, but they expect to engage with the content they consume, engage with both their friends, in many cases the talent, and it becomes part of a community. So I think for the last 7 years, we've built a brand and content and IP that's really meaningful to this generation and this audience by really respecting that they do love entertainment content, they do love TV, they just were not spoken to or connecting with what was sort of in the traditional TV ecosystem anymore.
Okay. Shelley, you already mentioned the number of different platforms that are out there. Netflix, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat. With so many different platforms out there, how important do you think it is for content creators to focus on a specific audience that sort of crosses those platforms? And then how do you tailor the content for each platform while still maintaining that consistent audience?
Yeah. Well, I think most importantly, what you pointed out is we think of what each user on that platform is looking for. So we are never taking YouTube content and just slapping it up into Snapchat. So we have a great team of producers who's always thinking about what is bespoke to that platform. And I think the importance, I mean, the importance for us of serving this generation across those platforms is it's an enormous generation that frankly is somewhat underserved. They have, they're 40% of the US population. They are creating a lot of the choices we're making. So they found Snapchat, they are driving TikTok, and then the rest of us are kind of catching up to them. So their importance in household purchase decisions can't be underestimated. So we think by serving them across all of those different platforms, we are building brand, we are learning about them, and what's amazing for us is through those daily dialogues and conversations, we're able then to go back to our longer form content and really have a knowledge of them. So they are so different, and it's absolutely worth it to serve things up to them.
And I would say there's a certain, I mean, people use the word authenticity a lot. They're great bullshit detectors. They are not thinking that a bunch of people are sitting in a room telling them what they want to watch or how they want to experience something. They feel a sense of control over their time, what they engage in. And I think by being on all these platforms and creating bespoke content that speaks to the experience, none of the content, unlike some traditional, TV brands, like everything we make is bespoke to that platform, the experience. YouTube is very narrative. We do very long, almost TV-like formats. It's a way more, I have to say, lean back experience, not TV, but in the ecosystem of social platforms, it certainly is. Instagram is way more about the brand. There's so much there. It's overwhelming. It's hard to find stuff. It's really about, connecting with that audience in shorter ways. And we play a lot of games at that platform, whereas TikTok, I think everybody, is really just, it's like the Wild West in many ways. And it's, a video could be something we shot in our office, cost us nothing, and take off. It was just talent walking the office and doing something silly and fun. So these platforms are really differentiated, and it's so critical that Awesomeness understands, why our audience comes to these platforms and what they expect out of us.
Right. You talk about that instantaneous feedback, and that you're able to get all that feedback immediately and react to it immediately, and that your audience feels much more like they control or they have an impact on what they're watching than a traditional television audience does, right? How do you balance the feedback from the audience with sort of what you as professionals and curators know about creating good content? I mean, is there ever a tension there between being too responsive to audience feedback and not giving things time to gestate, or?
I remember in the comments of one of our YouTube videos, they were talking about, oh, we want a longer episode, and I was like, leave them wanting more. we don't need to, you don't want the opposite. So I think there is a tension. I think where it's so helpful is in an Instagram poll, we can talk, we know social justice is very important to this audience. So we can talk to them about what are the issues that they're really interested in. And one that always percolates up is mental health. If you look, though, across scripted programming for television or film, there is a dearth of material, narrative, fiction that's dealing with mental health. So that's an example of a really helpful, that we can see what are they actually caring about and thinking about. But I absolutely agree, you're never going to please everyone all the time, so you do have to, and this is again where we have a team that's spending so much time every day, great stories win. Yes, they're a different generation, but they still care about great stories. The two words we talk about all the time that Rebecca hit on is relevant and authentic. So those are sort of great stories that are relevant and authentic, and you're not going to please everyone.
And to add to that, I think, for us, a lot of the engagement is about them being recognized and heard and their voice contributing to the conversation. It doesn't mean we got a note and we're going to change something. But the flip of that is, oftentimes we might see, for example, we have a show called My Dream Quinceanera that's been on the YouTube channel for years. We see a certain talent in that popping, one of the girls that people really feel connected to, they're really responding to, well, that helps us enable, well, let's maybe look at developing something around her. Or we might, so it could be talent discovery. It might be, right, a topic or an area of development, where now we're knee deep in love stories that was born out of, talent that we've worked with for a long time that people have never seen that part of their life. They've never seen them dating the Merrill twins. And so it's not necessarily dictating the creative, but it is hearing what they're passionate about and who's resonating. And I think that's more so certainly for the digital social platforms than it is for the long form streaming, which certainly has a longer cycle and a different process.
With those different platforms, and as you said, with Generation Z being the first truly digital generation, how does that impact how you approach the issue of audience engagement? And I guess that is probably a platform by platform question, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, which is there's development teams and community management who are really focused on a platform by platform experience. I think YouTube is very much still, I'd say of all the social platforms, the most storytelling platform, and that's where we have, longer formats and narratives and, almost 8 million subscribers, and we've spent 7 years developing for that. I think the other platforms, there's a lot more quick and pivot. They are growing incredibly fast. And for us, it's about, picking our lane and really connecting with them. So for example, on Instagram, it's way less about narrative for us and way more about pop culture and being the voice that they come to about everything that's trending and they might care about with a show called Daily Report. You can't be everything on these platforms because they are very crowded, and you have to think, what is my audience coming for, and where is my voice going to matter and resonate to them in this conversation? And so we try to be very thoughtful on how are we adding to the audience and to their experience of that platform with our content strategy.
Okay. Are there particular platforms that, in general, Generation Z is gravitating towards, and are there some that they just reject?
Facebook. Because we're on it.
Right.
They definitely they do have their own sensibility, and again, we're often chasing them. And what's wonderful beyond platform is they just have their own cultural sensibility. So when it comes to LGBTQ issues, they're setting the conversation. When it comes to diversity, it is the most diverse generation ever. So we're following them to platforms, we're following them to stories. It's exciting.
And I think it's a little bit of so Gen Z, as I said, is anywhere from, your 10-year-old daughter, my 9-year-old daughters, et cetera, to, someone who's about 20 now. So there's clearly an evolution in your experience of social platforms. I think YouTube is the most universal in many ways. Obviously, it's the oldest, but I think TikTok is very young. The audience is really the youngest part of our demographic. And so, I think it's a little bit about the age, and it's a little bit about certainly the personality and what they're coming to for, exactly.
Yeah, I was speaking to one of our other speakers who I'm going to be talking to later today, who's with the studio Pocket Watch, which has Hobby Kids TV and Evan Tube and Ryan's World, all these shows aimed at Generation Alpha, they're calling it right now. Oh, wow. And he talked about the fact that, when most of us were growing up, or many of us in this room, children's TV was very segmented, and it was very controlled in terms of, this is a show for preschoolers, this is a show for elementary school. You say Generation Z runs the gamut from 9, 10-year-olds up to 20-year-olds. That, as many opportunities as that presents, it's got to present challenges as well in terms of, not to sound like an old, but appropriate content for appropriate ages, right? Is that something that Awesomeness struggles with, or has to work very hard on, or are you just sort of letting the audience pick what they want to watch, and it's not really something you try to dictate?
We're really not making content for 9-year-olds.
Yeah.
Our sweet spot is really 13 to 22, which I think, to your point, 13, it's a lot of firsts.
Right.
It's a lot of firsts in their life, in their love lives, in their emotional development. And so I think that we're looking at a narrow, but we're very aware of brand and who we are on YouTube and Instagram. We're a best friend, we're a slightly cool older sister that's kind of putting their arm around you. We certainly aren't leading with any content because that's also not really what the audience is looking for. We find that they like the safe friendship that we're sort of offering. In our longer form content for Netflix and Hulu, we're looking for a wider audience. We want women who are 34 years old who remember, all of the trials and tribulations of high school. So we have a film, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, that,
Yes.
is popular, all the way up to the oldies like me. So, there's different moments that you're seizing on that, but I do think that we're very cognizant of the power that you can have in that girl's life, and we look to it as kind of educational, entertaining, fun, and a friend.
Right. So it can be those things without being a corny ABC after-school special that we watched in the 70s, right?
It can.
We hope so, yeah.
Right. If people in this room are looking at how to best reach Generation Z, what are sort of the top takeaways that you want them to leave with that they need to keep in mind in order to connect with that generation?
I'll say a couple things. I think influencers are real. The connection that they have with talent, social influencers, is incredibly powerful. They really have a direct, they are seeing from the biggest, most well-known influencers to very lesser known, of like somebody who reflects them, their experience, who is a friend to them, who makes them feel seen and heard. And it is, in these times, like incredibly important relationship to them, and they will go far and wide to be connected with an influencer and have that relationship. And I think and second to that is what we say about relatability and authenticity. It's, we're not an ABC special. You can't be. I think we can be, real and kind, but honest with the audience, because they are able to, they have a lot of choices. They can fact check really easily. There's just a lot more ability to question and get the answers they want. So I think those are two key things that I think are important. And then just understanding that they are very diverse, inclusive. They expect to see that reflected in the stories you're telling them, in the world you're representing. It's a very thoughtful generation. 50% of this generation is diverse. It sees the world in a different, in a way that our generations didn't. And so I think it's really important to understand them and their experience when you're connecting with them.
So that's the content, and I love that, real and kind and honest, as sort of three things that can work hand in hand. So that talks about how the content can reach the Generation Z. What about platforms? What advice do you have for content creators who are trying to reach Generation Z on these different platforms? How should they approach the platforms? You talked a little bit about long-form content being better for YouTube, other content being better for Instagram, but can you go into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, what's amazing is that the trends change so quickly. So I'm going to talk about it this moment in time, but to Rebecca's point, on Instagram, we're not planning 6 months out, because new stars will percolate up, new interests, and all of that. So on YouTube, there's a lot of power to the influencers. There's a lot of power right now with, let's say, challenge videos. So we have a couple of different formats called Versus, which is a challenge format where two influencers face off. We have another Detected, which is kind of a fun use of a lie detector. So those do really, really well for us. They do well in the library as well. They have an evergreen quality. And what we've been able to find is creating formats that we can put different talent into and build a relationship with them, see how the audience is responding to them, so the audience is familiar with the format and just showing up for the guest stars of that week. So that's something that we've had a lot of luck with. We do a lot in docu-series, and docu follows, Rebecca mentioned My Dream Quinceañera. That's a show where we've been able to create a whole world of spin-offs based on girls that were popular, based on them at new stages in their life. That audience, Quinceañera, we're obviously speaking to all audiences, but there is a Latinx, audience that we think is underserved as well. What are other?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me the key piece too is really having platform expertise. Not only does the content trends change all the time, but new features and functionalities are happening all the time, right? On Instagram, we're doing IGTV, we're doing stories, we're doing in-feed. You have to do all of it, You need to, right now, we really feel a lot of connection with our audience on stories, which is crazy to say since it's gone after 24 hours, but it's really, you have to explore all the new functionalities and see what really resonates and where you're connecting and reaching the audience. And I think there's just an incredible amount of experimentation and innovation that comes with, I come from a cable television background where it really was one size fits all. It's the opposite of that. I mean, they're very custom platforms where you have to be, not only in the case of YouTube, understanding the algorithm, responding to the community management and the engagement, on these other platforms, it's really, on TikTok, it's respecting what the trends are and understanding it's as I said earlier, the Wild West, and understanding what's bubbling up. In that case, they're really controlling a lot of the trends. So you have to sort of be connected specifically to TikTok to know what's happening there. So each of these platforms, both how you engage with what's happening, what's working more broadly, or what the tool set is for you to take advantage of, is a ever-evolving investment of time and people really who are passionate about it.
What about the monetization side of things? How does Generation Z relate to advertising and branded content differently from other generations? And how does Awesomeness then respond to that?
So, they influence, a lot of spending power. They are, very material, but they're completely happy to hear about new products, but they want to know that you are pushing something on them. They don't want an ad, but they're very open to branded content. They're because they're born on these platforms, and if the content speaks to them and is genuine, you call out that it's branded. Absolutely, we have done an incredible job with our sales team of both doing branded and natural integrations into our YouTube shows. So most recently, we have a docu-series, which is sort of Real Girls, called Malibu Surf, where we had Spotify integrate into that series. We've had incredible successful relationships, both independently and as part of Viacom, because it's a hard-to-reach audience. And the 7 years of content, the 8 million subscribers, has built this trust. And so we've had branded content on the platform since day one. And there really is, and we're, A, the platforms call it out, but B, we try to do the creative as passionately, as strongly as we would approach it if it wasn't a branded series. And I think because of that, we've seen a lot of success and awesomeness helping brands reach an audience that's otherwise hard to, not accessible.
Okay, so what's coming from Awesomeness in the next 6 months to a year that people should watch for? Or 6 months to a year, you just said that's too far in advance to predict.
Well, I'll do digital, and she does a lot on the studio side, but so we had a wonderful show that was really called Twin My Heart, which I mentioned earlier, with the Merrill twins, which I find this really interesting, which is, most of you watch it, it's sort of a Bachelor-like experience. These girls, the Merrill twins, are sweet influencers on YouTube. As I said earlier, they do a lot on their own channel, but they never talk about their love life. And we did this sort of setup with guys and try to find the right match. One of the twins was matching the other, and it was wildly successful. And what became very clear to us on the platform was this audience had never watched The Bachelor. They have no idea what that is. They thought we invented this concept, and and we took that credit. But no, but they don't know these traditional formats, and that the romance, it just and everything about that format really translated to that platform. We have a show that launched last week and is trending on YouTube with Karina Garcia. Same thing. She's a big influencer, does a lot around slime, but she has this wild, crazy Mexican family, and they all live in this giant mansion, and many of them are influencers, a lot of children, they have a lot of their friends living in the house, and it's a little bit like a modern day Kardashians. It's really fun, and again, people know her as an influencer, but it's having the ability to connect with her and her family and see them a little bit more authentic and in different situations that you don't otherwise see. And that's been working really well for us. And lastly, like I mentioned, we have a pop news show called Daily Report that sort of covers a lot of what's trending, both on sort of the talent influencer side, but in traditional entertainment, and it's really been popping. Again, I'd say it's because there's obviously more traditional platforms that are talking about pop news, but it's sort of your friend. We shoot it in office. It's a woman who produces it, shoots it, edits it, and she's just going through your favorite gossip and what's trending in a way that was like you talk with your friends, and it's really been successful for us on Instagram.
On the TV and film side, we had To All the Boys I've Loved Before, so we've made for Netflix subsequent films that bring all the people back who the audience loved. We're shooting right now 2 second seasons of television series. One is Trinkets for Netflix. One is a show that we were nominated for an Emmy, Pen 15 for Hulu. So we're actively developing new stuff and bringing back the hits.
All right. We've got a couple minutes for questions. I can come around with a microphone.
Not my water.
I'm gonna tip you off to me. There we go.
I told you to move forward.
Thank you. My question is about monetization and the FTC cracking down on YouTube about targeted ads, making this generation a very dangerous or risky venture for a lot of people. What do you think of, besides promoted content, how do you address this issue?
Well, so what we didn't make clear at the beginning is, so Awesomeness has a digital a digital studio, which is directed at short form platforms, and a TV and film studio. And so we're both licensed revenue and ad revenue. And we use the platform sort of in an ecosystem where we really do leverage a lot of what we're doing on YouTube, sort of build a platform and an audience that we can activate in and around our TV and our film projects as well. So we look to multiple revenue streams, because I think depending solely on monetization through YouTube, is risky. With that being said, we do have a very a brand on the platform like that we've built over many years, and work with the same advertisers over and over again in very specific executions. Like Hollister is a big partner of ours. We've done original series with them 3 years in a row that we've created on the channel. So it's a very, I would say, and we sell and monetize directly for the most part. So I think have been really pleased so far, but we are cognizant that it's risky. Obviously, it's very difficult to monetize on Facebook and Instagram. So I think it's critical to sort of have multiple revenue streams when you are a digital first business, so you're not at risk when these changes come down the path.
All right, we have time for one more question right here.
Coming from a media buyer perspective, other than the streaming platforms you guys are already streaming your content to, Netflix, YouTube, do you have an app where all of this content is located, or it's just kind of...
We don't. It's a great question. I think what we haven't mentioned, as people may know, is we're part of Viacom. So we have done an incredible job, I'll pat ourselves on the back, of controlling and owning the majority of our IP, both short form as well as long form. I think we have been cautious about an Awesomeness specific app in the market because our demographic is young, they don't have credit cards, they don't typically pay. With that being said, we're part of now the Nickelodeon family and the broader Viacom. It's certainly, we feel like an opportunity for growth, but we felt, given how savvy this audience is and given the content is on streaming platforms and elsewhere, we tried transactional, for example, and they know too much. You can't fool them into thinking that they don't know where to get it for free, or so. It's something definitely in the hopper for us, but not something we've done yet.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Rebecca and Shelley from Awesomeness.
Thanks for having us. I'm going to follow you that way.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. I'd like to bring up Adam Lewinson from Tubi. I don't know how many of you flew into LAX yesterday, but if you did, you probably saw Tubi's new campaign, NotOnNetflix.com. And if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And I think that kind of gets to the heart of what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. A recent study showed that consumers are only willing, or they only want to spend about $21 on SVOD services. Most consumers are already spending more than that, so they're looking for other ways to get content that they want. AVOD, advertising VOD, is certainly one way to do that, and one of the most innovative companies in that space is Tubi. So I'd like to welcome Adam Lewinson from Tubi to talk about some of the issues surrounding AVOD and Tubi in particular.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So for those who don't know what Tubi is, tell us about it.
Sure. Well, Tubi is the largest AVOD platform, and we're the only one that is just doing free video on demand. So if you look at the broader scape of AVOD, there's linear, there's EPGs, et cetera, and our vision of the future that I'm sure we'll get into is that the future is really just about pure video on demand. So if I'm in an elevator doing the elevator pitch, we're free Netflix. And you mentioned our brand campaign for NotOnNetflix.com. For those of you who are on your phones, I'm okay if you go to NotOnNetflix.com while I'm talking, or download the Tubi app. Either one is fine.
Right. And so, I was talking with Ben from Philo about this earlier. So much of the media attention right now is on the SVOD apps. Particularly, you've got Disney Plus, you've got Netflix, you've got HBO Max in the works. How can a platform like Tubi stand out in that landscape? And how do you see Tubi in relationship to those blockbusters that we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think to really answer it, I got to go back a little bit into history. Before the streaming wars, if anyone can remember the days before the streaming wars, television, 85 to 90% of the TV ecosystem has always been free with ads. And it really is still. It's just with Netflix and Hulu, et cetera, coming onto the scene, making a lot of noise, and rightly so, with some really incredible premium content. In the case of Netflix, really revolutionizing the nature of what television is and how we view content. So right now, obviously, with Disney Plus, et cetera, there's a lot of energy with the SVOD side of the business, which has been proven to be obviously a very viable model. But to your point, there's only so many SVOD platforms that are going to survive into the future, or at least have that, you use the word blockbuster, I like that. How many streaming services will we consider to be blockbusters 12 months from now, and how much of them are on the next level down, also rans, et cetera. Meanwhile, you have to not look at the trades, you have to look at the consumers and their behavior. And nothing has changed with consumers. Still, roughly 85% of consumers in the US actually prefer the free with ad model. That's, for the most part, what they're used to, what they grew up with, and it is still what they prefer. And really just the past year and a half is when AVOD has really become a concept that's really seeped into the consciousness of consumers, in part what we're doing with our ad campaign, which we can come back to. So we really see this as it's just a natural pendulum shift, and ad dollars need to go somewhere as the eyeballs move from one to the other. And then the last point on this is really just where does Tubi fit into this ecosystem? And our point of view really is this. There's a time and place where you want to watch Game of Thrones, you want to watch Stranger Things, you want to watch sort of that elite tier of content, which used to be broadcast, then it was basic cable, now for the most part it's SVOD. And it does look like that's really going to continue. But what are you going to watch next? Once you're done with that elite piece of content, which comes with a very specific business model, after that, and we were talking about this briefly beforehand, interests really get personalized very quickly. And that becomes really a perfect match with AVOD, or at least our vision of what AVOD is with personalization. So we don't, even though we have notonnetflix.com,
right?
We're not saying you should watch Tubi, not Netflix. Really what we're saying is we're complementary. You're gonna go to Netflix, you're gonna watch a certain level of content, maybe it's on Disney Plus, maybe it's on HBO Max, etc. But what's gonna complement the rest of your viewing experience? Where are you gonna find this deep library of what you're looking for? And the economics behind that don't match SVOD, they match AVOD.
Well, and content is your specialty, so let's talk a little bit about Tubi's content library, because if any of you are looking at the Tubi app right now or the Not on Netflix campaign, you'll see that you've got a very strong catalog of content, of film, and you talked about personalization as well. So could you talk about your content licensing strategy as well as how you then personalize that content for your users?
Yeah, sure. So I learned programming, sort of the traditional content programming, from basic cable. I was at FX for a long time, et cetera. And it all starts with audience and who's watching. So with Tubi, it really starts with who's watching as well. We now have over 20 million viewers. So with that comes a lot of diversity in terms of age, in terms of demographics, in terms of what people want to watch. So we break them up into cohorts. And then we really look at how do we super serve, I'm thinking of McDonald's, I must be hungry. Super serve what our audience is looking for. And then this is where I really have an equal partner, which is machine learning, right? I am partnered with the machines where we have these proprietary algorithms that really help very quickly identify what people want to watch. So we're looking at the data all the time. To make a very long story short, there used to be so much water cooler talk.
Right.
You go into the office and, oh, did you watch MASH, or did you watch Friends, or whatever? And that was our behavior. That still happens for a Game of Thrones, but those events are really few and far between. The trend is really just, I have my own personal interests. You have your, probably all of us in this room, there's gonna be some crossover, but if we did a diagram, there's some things that are communal, but then we're all over the place.
Right.
And so really so much of the future of television consumption, obviously, and streaming is, you wanna watch this? Okay, here you go. So we do a lot of thing on the product side to identify if you wanna watch horror, my job is to get you into horror as quickly as possible, and then have a deep, diverse library of horror. Big recent hit titles, really obscure older titles, everything in between, we're gonna have that for you. And then if we identify, oh, this viewer actually doesn't want horror at all, good to know.
Right.
Because the more we show them horror, that's just not a good experience for them.
Right, right. Talk a little bit about Tubi's approach to advertising and how it is, you said earlier that the vast majority of people still prefer the free ad-supported model, but still nobody likes ads. And advertising targeting is getting better, but it's still something that you have to be conscious of in terms of what ads you're giving your viewers and how that's going to affect their experience on the service. So could you talk about Tubi's approach to advertising? How does the ad load compare to what one might get watching an ad-supported TV channel?
Sure. Well, at a high level, Tubi essentially has about half the ad load of commercial television, of broadcast or cable. The other layer below that is we have a very data-driven approach to what's the right ad mix. So I would actually say consumers are actually fine trading their time in exchange for free. It's just there's parameters.
Okay.
So if you're watching a show on basic cable these days and you're watching, up to 15 minutes per hour or more, that feels like too much, right? Or there's, on the other extreme, you're getting ads, but you're also paying for it, and why are you double dipping? So I think if a consumer, we don't take credit cards, so if we don't take your credit card and we say, this is the value prop, and we're very closely watching ad tolerance, that goes a long way to having a positive experience. Ad targeting, I mean, you're right, it's still an imperfect science, but improving every day. So it is getting better. I remember very early days of streaming where people would complain, that Jack in the Box ad in every single pod, probably 3 or 4 times per pod. That would actually happen. And that's obviously a horrible experience for everyone, including Jack in the Box. That's not how they want to spend their money. But we do such a better job these days with frequency capping. Now that AVOD has really gotten to scale, there's so many more advertisers and so many different campaigns that there's a way to personalize it in a better fashion. So yeah, still early days, imperfect, but really getting better. But really the magic happens when the viewer feels like, okay, I'm watching a sufficient number of ads, I'm not complaining, that's fine. And the ads are targeted to me or close enough, and I'm getting the content that I want to see. That's really the mix.
Well, let's talk about a subset of your audience. And Tubi does have a dedicated kids section, right? And how do you approach advertising as it relates to kids, especially when kids today are so used to getting content ad-free? If their parents have Netflix and they watch on Netflix, they're not necessarily used to the ad pod experience the way that we are.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So we just launched. We're still in November. Last month, we launched Tubi Kids, which is a dedicated, not a separate app, just a dedicated section of Tubi, where when you go into it, it is a kid-friendly environment where it's just age-appropriate content, age-appropriate ads, COPPA compliant. Probably, usually I have to explain it in this room. You're probably like, yeah, COPPA compliant. Certain privacy, data targeting, things that you are not allowed to do. And a lot of this is in reaction to lots of things that have been happening digitally in terms of children's ad targeting. So in terms of kids, well, sure, many of them do watch and have grown up with Netflix, which is an ad-free experience. Others, though, YouTube. YouTube has actually made, in the previous Awesomeness panel, as you were talking about Gen Z, and you can also now go to this Gen Alpha, they're watching YouTube. And they're used to, 5 seconds, click. And in some cases, I can't click, I can't fast forward, I guess I'm gonna watch this ad. So ad tolerance is actually higher than the generation that really relied on the DVR. because the DVR was all about there's ads, fast forward, and I'm
Right.
not watching them. So yeah, that really isn't an issue. We see it more as an opportunity.
Okay. I know there's been a recent discussion, or actually you do have a UK launch planned, right?
Yeah.
Is there, talk a little bit about the opportunities that might exist for expanding into other markets, the UK included.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's interesting. So globally, live linear is still the dominant form of people watching television. So yes, Netflix has huge penetration, some with Amazon, et cetera. And in some markets, yeah, the trends for SVOD are really growing. It's very early days for AVOD, really beyond North America, but it's time. So we're live in Canada. We have a terrific business there. We launched in August, if I have my dates right, in Australia.
Okay.
So still early days there. In 2020, we'll be in the UK. We're being very strategic about which markets to go to, and really looking for the opportunity. A lot of it, though, really comes down to, is it a market where viewers are open to streaming, and how's the ad market, and can we bring all of that together? So still early days for us. Obviously, UK is a really phenomenal opportunity.
Right.
And more to come there.
Okay, so we've talked about what content people are watching. How are they watching Tubi? What are you finding in terms of the sort of device and platform breakdown for the ways people watch Tubi?
Yeah, that is really interesting. So, we have the best distribution footprint amongst all the AVODs, so we're pretty much everywhere where people want to stream. And we do see interesting trends. I just saw one last night. I can't say it publicly, but I thought, wow, okay, our business is really growing over here. That surprises me in a good way. But it's a really terrific mix of streaming boxes, right? The Rokus and the Amazon Fires, et cetera, smart TVs. For us, cable boxes. So that was a bit counterintuitive for us. But it's worked out incredibly well. So we were the first AVOD to get any type of traditional MVPD distribution as a standalone app, first with Xfinity, secondly with Cox Contour. And it's really been a really great way to reach the type of viewer that we typically haven't been getting, because most of it on these other devices, we're getting cord cutters, cord nevers. When you're on Comcast Xfinity, well, you're getting people who, by the nature of being on Comcast, you have not cut the cord.
Right.
So that's been really interesting for our business. And then I'll just say mobile remains interesting. I think a lot of that is generational. I'm typically not going to sit and watch a 2-hour movie on my phone.
Right.
But my kids will.
Yeah.
So consumption on mobile is quite strong. And as you take it to international, there's some territories, and a lot of this has to do with broadband penetration, et cetera, where it's primarily a mobile marketplace.
Right. Where do you see or want to see Tubi a year from now?
Oh boy. Should I give you the numbers? Should I give you our goals?
Give us all you got.
I'll tell you everything. Look, we have been fortunate to be growing every single month. Obviously, we want to keep doing that, and we're mindful that as the #1 AVOD platform, you got to keep growing. So obviously, we're very focused on that, and not just global, but there's still plenty of white space here in the U.S. and Canada, et cetera. We have a very specific data-driven approach to our business that a year from now, I'm actually very excited because I know the level of data that I get to see now, and I know how that data, when you get into machine learning and algorithms, it just gets smarter and better. And so I'm excited to see where the data leads us a year from now. So that's certainly helpful. And the last thing I'll say is, obviously in just launching our kids side of our product, it's a huge ongoing opportunity in that space.
Right. Excellent. Well, let's open it up to questions from the audience. If you have a question, I will bring a microphone around. Actually, Jose will bring the microphone around.
Is this on?
Can we get the handheld on?
Check, check.
Hi. As a multi-platform entity, what is your approach to measurement, and what sort of data or tools do you use to give advertisers the confidence to shift dollars away from traditional formats to OTT?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's internal and external. So obviously internally, we have our own metrics. We have a lot of transparency with advertisers so that we share with them as much data as we can about the performance. Then there's external, obviously Nielsen, et cetera. As not the revenue guy, I'm not the expert on all of that, but obviously this is where AVOD in general is maturing as a business. I do know that as I've talked to media buyers over time, the promise of AVOD is incredibly attractive because it offers everything that linear does, but much better targeting, much better data. You can get much more granular. So that's incredibly helpful. There's certain buyers, obviously, we have a terrific business now, so there's a lot of buyers who are in based on the level of third-party data that they get. And there's some who want more, so we're listening to that. Again, as not the revenue guy, I'm not in the weeds on what's going on there. But yeah, to address your overall point, it's an evolution. And as linear continues its secular decline, and I'm a media buyer, and I'm looking to place dollars, there's where are the eyeballs and where's the measurement? And obviously those have to come together.
Kind of related to that question, would you say a lot of your ad inventory is programmatic?
So it's a mix of programmatic and direct.
Okay.
So we really started to build our direct sales force, I guess about 2 years ago. And it's now quite robust across 7 cities, I want to say at this point, across the US. The healthy mix is both, because there's different reasons why programmatic is incredibly important. There's different reasons why direct is incredibly important. The right answer is a mix. And that also makes digital so much more attractive to buyers, just having the different variety of ways you can buy.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Adam? All right, well, once again, thank you, Adam.
All right, thanks
And it's
everybody,
lunchtime.
appreciate it.